From today on, I have a very strong relationship with Ljubljana because my computer died this morning in the hotel. So you have to excuse me, I have quite an improvised lecture because most of the part which I've prepared was on the hard disk and not on the external one. But we find a solution, so forgive me if I'm hopping a little bit around. So Feld 72 is a collective made up of 5 partners: Mario Peintner, Richard Scheich, Peter Zoder, Michael Obrist, and Ann-Kathrin Vleit. Oops. So we came from different backgrounds, different nations. We're also one of the first generation which had to make the switch from the paperwork to the computer, and also the first generation which was able to travel Europe throughout Erasmus programs. We are a collective, that means we're working together also on a base of discussion and trying to find a solution and expanding our possibilities. That means a lot of that, how we are working, is really based on a conceptual basis at the beginning and then switches on a higher level of specialization. And our practice is made of architects. We are 5 partners, but now we have expanded. We are approximately 20 persons in the office. And the range we are working on, it's very different. It's come from temporary project to very long-term building process, and our budget varied a lot in the last years. We won a lot of competition, so we have to deal right now between projects which take 1 day and cost maybe 2,000 euros, and other project, the biggest project now is the headquarters of the Austrian Post, and which costs approximately 60 million euros. So it's a complete wide range and also complete different kind of question. But today I will focus on the idea of the social and the idea of the public space. From the very beginning, that was one of the most important questions for us: what is architecture, and what is the enormous university of relationship of human beings in space, and how could we expand the possibilities throughout tools. And also already in the 60s there was a big kind of call for this kind of tools, and Stuart Brand's Whole Earth Catalog stands just for a lot of this kind of new thinking about that what design and that what access to life problems could be. We had the occasion to reflect a little bit on our work in a broader basis, in a wide panorama which we made for the Biennale of Venice, where we wanted to put all our project in a kind of a context and the questioning of the inherent problems which were the base of the interventions or the long-term process. So as we are calling our office an office of architecture and urban strategies, and the series of urban strategies started from the very beginning, where we wanted to find out what could we do without a client, how could we self-initiate processes, mainly in public space, mainly as a response to an unsatisfactory moment in architectural education. And we are trying to find tools which we have never been taught, but we experimented. And so this project varied from things where we tried to get commitment, engagement, and a perception changing about space. This was a project which we did on the border between Italy, Slovenia, and Austria. And it was a project initiated by 3 cultural institutions, exactly from these 3 nations. And it was a 1-day project. It was a long procession to forgotten towns in the middle of Europe, which were part of this new transformation of the European landscape, but which were paradoxically disappearing because they were slightly away from the main axis. So what we did was, together with this kind of temporary public, we made a mapping of the village we were searching of, Mogessa di Qua, and we're putting little kind of aluminium plates which were reflecting the mapping of the village itself on the ground, and made a 3-hour procession, where we then arrived in this former square of this village, which was half empty, half new filled with new people coming, but new people coming from different background. And trying to make together a building which was a kind of a memory machine, which was nothing else than a huge kind of analog photograph, and which is then became a little part of this kind of remote and forgotten square. The question of public-private is also a very deep political question, mainly in Italy. And we were invited in an area not far away from your borders to Monfalcone, next to Trieste. And we were invited from a cultural institution to a very strange piece of land. It was illegal housings put into an area next to the Isonzo River, but after a strong wind were half destroyed. But in that moment of destruction, the Italian government made a kind of a cut and forbid it to continue to live there, forbid it to repair the houses, etc. So the inhabitants of this kind of housings made a kind of a juridical adventure against the state of Italy, which is still open. So there was a moment where this strange and paradox situation of, on the one side, everyday creativity, but on the other side, this complete illegal act of appropriation could transform into the complete disappearance of the situation, or it could continue to exist. And we wanted to make a kind of a procession through this kind of topic and made a live reflection on the phenomena which was behind this complexity. So we started from the first ruins, and which were also the symbol of the transformation of Italian landscape, the symbol of transformation of Italian agriculture, and worked through this phenomena, which was in the end nothing else than a phenomena which we will find in whole Italy. Satellites have discovered that Italy has 2.2 million illegal houses on its ground. It's like as if you hide whole Switzerland in Italy. And, but also this kind of illegal activity is a solid ground of the Italian economy. And without this kind of illegal activities, without all the young Africans which are working in the south in the agriculture, it could not survive. So there's a kind of a very strange discussion on in Italy. It was also the moment of deep crisis. And so this parallelity of phenomena strikes us the most. On the other hand, this kind of very, very interesting creativity in this moment of freedom. We had discussion with the owners of the house, trying to find out what was their role in this kind of ecological system. What was the potential? What was this kind of gray ground on which they were standing? What was the dark side of it? But trying also to understand. It was a landscape of invisible things. Looked very nice, but also it was the most, how can I say, the territory with the most deaths caused by asbestos, because there was the big ship industry, which then had a renewal, etc. So the idea of a kind of a landscape which is just a symbol of everything what is going on in Italy right now, but not just an Italian problem, but really also a European problem. A kind of society which is just can just be held up because it has kind of a helping system from women coming from Ukraine, from the East, and a complete system of parallelities. Is that what was the main striking moment for us to trying to reveal this kind of paradox situation? So on the one hand, we had potentially wonderful sites on the river, but on the other hand, we had the ship industry which was building for 500 million euros the same kind of poetry, but with a complete other kind of effort. We had the bungalows, which were the main export product as an idea from the Bengali culture, because bungalow just means house of the Bengalis. And it's the only typology which we found in 20 kind of language already rooted. So, and if you compare today, the most important export what the Bengali culture is now offering is cheap labor force. but or specialized person which are working in the ship industry. So there is a complete kind of a global circle running around. People are going through very difficult routes to Europe to find a job, working in the ship industry, and then having the ships which have to change after 20 years being destroyed again in Bangladesh by their own cousins, and making an enormous ecological catastrophe, but also providing for the steel for a whole nation. So a kind of paradox which we wanted to reveal, and what we wanted to show was exactly that. I don't go deeper, but it was one of these projects which was just based on a long research, but then had an one-day impact. And this was so-called the last number, which we wanted just to reveal, which had also to do with the phenomenon itself. It was those which came from the other side, the number of those who survived this kind of trip. It was 1 year ago, and still the topic is open. Still we don't know how to go on and how to create this kind of new European identity which embraces all these phenomena in another way. The idea of tools was very striking from the beginning, finding new tools which can enable people to inscribe themselves in space, find possibilities to change space. And this was one of the first things we developed, was just stickers, just creating very banal things, but what should enable you to mark yourself into space. And this was something which we printed out 20,000 times and let it spread around. But this was a project where we wanted to make reflection about this kind of contemporary transformation of space. This was a project which we then did in Sao Paulo in Brazil. And in that year, Sao Paulo changed rapidly because the mayor made this new kind of law that advertisement was forbidden in public space. So it was a really, really strange moment. When you went into a city and all that what big city life is about, the lights, everything has disappeared. It looked like a little bit like one of these Italo Calvino cities where just one element is strikingly put out and transforms into a complete new identity. And but also there was a very, very interesting phenomena going on, so that capital didn't stop. It needed in a certain way a kind of representation, the product. And so there was this phenomenon of the young favelanos, or the older ones, which for a few dollars or raise in Brazil, just went around and made advertisement by themselves, which was really based on the idea that obviously you have the right of free speech in public space, but here it was really perverted in the situation that the body itself transformed in the last bastion, in the last kind of advertisement flat. And we tried to reflect that through a project and an intervention. So for us, this was one of the main questions. How is the actor transforming the spaces which are already there? And obviously, the questioning of that, what are temporary public spaces? This was also one very early project we did. We did it for Rotterdam. And for us, the most striking situation there was this kind of modernity was all about the call of speed, of mobility, and but all this kind of mobility caused also a disaster, a daily disaster, where the speed and the mobility crashes down, the system break. We call it the traffic jam. And in Rotterdam, you have this moment that certain people which work in certain areas of the city every day encounters or losing 2.5 hours of their daily life just stuck in a bloody kind of aluminium box. And for us, the question was, how could we transform this into something else, and how could we put that into a kind of a question? And together with our friends of engineering, D+NL, we developed a product which was really based on this kind of the victim of traffic jams. If you are in a traffic jam, you are or aggressed or bored, or you feel lonely. But in the end, as the distance it's very good between faces and you perceive persons, it's the perfect place of interconnection. And for us, the thing was, could we create a tool which helps you to break the barrier, which is based on very banal things, which makes a difference. The little difference of the poetry of the everyday, something Rotterdam is a society which has no tradition of non-verbal communications. If it would be in Italy, obviously we wouldn't have made such a product. But the point was, what gives confidence in such nations? And it's the product, because a product stands for a company which is behind, which obviously was complete fake, but which gives you the idea that you can trust it, and then you can try it into something else. And also the wish to transform language of hand and communication into new language. So we made it for real. We had the base, and we produced it, and it was the first time in our life that we searched traffic jams and not run away from it. We made 400 kilometers of traffic jam, just trying to find the moment and to let it flow. It's the magical moment of the sacred object entering your car, so that you can open it up. It's vacuum packed, and so we made then a film. This is just a collage, but the film was really, really nice, and just having it here. But the point was really that how can you, also in a positive way, trying to make communication possible. But sometimes it was really just a little kind of thing, the thin line between doing something and doing nothing. And the idea was really the idea of having then a product which could then work. And this was the only person, unfortunately in Holland, which has constantly the traffic jam with her. This was Queen Beatrix. But obviously she was also one of the first victims itself. So this was more a questioning of that, what a public space could be. This was another early project where we wanted to work on a public space which in that years still didn't exist in the perception of the people. This was the new Museumsquartier in Vienna, which I think a lot of you might know. But there was this strange kind of design of the forecourt which had any sense, but most interesting was that there was nothing going on and nobody knew what was behind. So what we wanted to do is to privatize it and to initiate a process and look if there is a reaction of people to this kind of little bourgeois dream of a kind of a Schrebergarten. So we just proposed tools and a kind of densification of tools in a little bourgeois Rem Koolhaas dream of densification. So that, but just by offering tools, but not to promote an event. So there was no spreading around. Facebook didn't exist at that time. So it was just, let's things happen and let's see if people react. And it was really, really interesting how they really then appropriate themselves. And we were also living in the little hut. And it was fascinating how just the proposal of tools could make a difference, also without giving them any kind of advice. So this was one of these kind of first really positive aspects of the idea of tools, but mainly the important question obviously was if there were traces left, if people could react to this place. And from the year after already, the Museumsquartier asked for another project, but we said it makes much more sense if they do it by themselves, if they change. And now, if you go to Vienna, they really have a really clever strategy with the Enzis, with this kind of furniture going out. So it has become a very livable space in the end. Another question was obviously the idea between the temporary and the static one. Every temporary project, everything is possible, but in the moment it has to be static. The possibility reduces to a max, as everybody knows. And so it's really, really difficult if you program public space for a long-term matter and with all the rules, what happened with them. So we were invited to make a public square in a little town in Lower Austria. And the nice context on how it happened was there was a special institution in the government of the Lower Austria, the cultural department, which made a very, very clever decision. Normally, if you have public houses and public competition for public buildings, there's a small amount of the budget which is used for the arts. And in the best case scenario, architects, artists are developing together something, but in the normal scenarios, architects are finishing the building, there is a little competition, and the artist has just two ways of interacting, or a submissive one, or a very aggressive one. And but they found it would be much clever for certain smaller regions to put the money in a bigger pot and then to initiate bigger projects in public space. And this was just a few of them which they made, and we were invited also to this kind of little village, which had a very important kind of promenade of the contemporary art already, but the village itself was very small, nothing spectacular at all. So we went on site and asked people what they wanted to have, and the really shocking moment was when everybody was saying they just want parking in the only square they had. And so we took that for serious, but tried to make something out of that. And so we made them a kind of a square design where we offered them the possibility to park it full. But every second of the parking squares has another function as well. So if you enter the space, you have to make a decision. Or you let it with the public function, or you are brutal and you destroy it. Every plot has the size 2 meters 50 per 5 meters, exact the size you need for a parking area. If you have a Porsche Cayenne and you are from this area, you might enter the water basin. But if you are a tourist, you would never dare. So the more you know about the space, the more it's your responsibility, and the more you destroy something or you let something grow. So we put the ball back to them. We offered something, but they had to decide. So then we finished it, and for example, this one is officially a parking square for the cars. And where we didn't want somebody to park, we just put a parking place for handicapped people. But also there, the same thing exists. People who know that this is officially not that, park there. But also here you see the success. It worked. People then decided to put benches on it and let it grow. The second thing was we had to make a bus stop, but we wanted to transform it into a tool which could work for 90% of daily life, but also for 10% of something special. And also for that it also needed, we created a kind of a stage, and we tried to pimp it up, to create a kind of a system where you could, where the choir is singing, where the major could make his kind of speech, where the young kids could smoke the first joint, nobody sees them. It's a kind of a DJ cancel. So it has all this kind of function. Parallelly, it gives the indication that next to you, like in a huge map, it's full of contemporary art. So also here, the idea was really 90% daily life, but 10% the possibility at least to amplify it and then to transform it to a tool which could make a difference. This is a project which we did in public space, but was just a kind of a forecourt of a building where we just wanted to take the main element which we found, the stair, and transformed it to something else to create a new kind of entry situation, etc. But it was officially a public space without a function, but obviously it had one by the determination of that what we did. But this is something, again, what was more like a hidden agenda for us, to make it as a place for skaters, to make it as a place for encountering itself. But officially, it was just a stair. And it was the only project where we were invited as artists, and so we had to sign it. This is a project where we invited in another part of the globe. These were the photographs of an American with Chinese roots, which went to southern China in 1980. These were all the pictures he made. And he made the pictures in a little town, a normal fisher village, where the first kind of movement was all about mobility on bikes. And in that year, Deng Xiaoping established a special economic zone exactly on this area. So in this kind of transformation, we could witness what humankind is capable of, because this village is called Shenzhen. Shenzhen right now has already 2 million more people, and yeah, the most radical transformation of like human ground in the history of mankind, from 30,000 to 40 million in 30 years. Complete top-down, obviously, with a complete different kind of idea of government, complete different idea of memory and history and possibilities. It's even for Chinese people shocking. and this is the most democratic building you could imagine. This is the municipality. I think it's about 1 kilometer more or less, but it has a big open space for the Qi to pass through. So if you think about Chinese cities, obviously you think about mobility on bikes, and also we were thinking about mobility on bikes, and it would make sense. But Shenzhen, they were much more clever. They forbidden the bike because it was the symbol of poorness. And they wanted to have a city which demonstrates the power of this new economy. Whereas you know that in Europe, this bike has become something very, very expensive. It's become a lifestyle product. But as a matter of fact, a bike in China and a bike in Europe are much different. Both are very flexible and very ecological and would really make sense in a city like that. But parallelly to that, there were new phenomena rising up, transport system on 3 bikes, and everything which generates economy is in a certain way allowed in southern China. And but this kind of phenomena was really interesting for us, and we wanted to develop a tool for public space based on this phenomena, but add a new function of that what the public space could be, not just as an area of commerce, but really also as an area of that what public space is capable of. So first of all, the speaker's corner as a possibility at least of the possibility of free speech in public space, which obviously in China it's still a problem. Urban boxing as a reference, and also to a culture which officially is based on harmony but has an enormous amount of aggression within. As you know, the one-child politics created an army of 25 million men without the possibility to have a woman. So it means the most dangerous animal on earth. So for them we wanted to make something to let the aggression grow. And also karaoke as a very popular phenomenon, also if it was coming from the main enemy of the Second World War, Japan. So we made an analog karaoke machine, and we built it. We were 1 month on site. We built it there, and we went through the city. And I don't tell you how hard it was to communicate. Nobody spoke English. Nobody of us spoke Chinese. But the interesting thing was that the tools itself spoke for themselves, and that people start to interact. And for us, it was really the idea of having in this kind of monofunctional city a possibility to go to specific areas and to add like a plug-in to amplify certain things. And in the combination of all the tools together, we wanted to demonstrate also the possibility of certain areas in public space. The analog karaoke machine was like a wheel where you slowly walk to read the text. So we had, like in Hong Kong, one nation, two system, left side Chinese songs, right side famous pop songs, but it was in a certain way a celebration of capitalism. So it was really funny to see them singing capitalist songs like money, money, money. And it was, yeah, the main idea was really that, to look how just machines itself could interact and just to find possibilities of letting them interact. Then we were invited to London to Hyde Street, which was in the area in that year to the Cummings Olympics, and we wanted to use the idea of the trailers to focus on that specific part of the city, which was in rapid changement, in rapid moment of gentrification. But as you know, London is one of the most surveilled public areas of the world, and so we wanted to celebrate the everyday life, but also the surveillance of it, that you get aware of that, and created a kind of a mirror system. We created, in dedication to the Olympics, a kind of a stadium of the everyday, and people passing by were put on the screen by hidden video cameras, and were integral part of the stage. But they didn't know that the applause was for them when they were passing by. And so we made analysis of different spaces within that kind of city. And this was Public Hedge, another of this family, which was just a celebration of the possibility also to have an intimate moment in public space. And we put it in the most hardcore situation in Milan, during the Milano Salone del Mobile, just to also as a moment of reflection that. Sometimes also the possibility to create buildings offers you the possibility to create public space and to amplify it. We were invited to make the festival center for the Styrian Art Festival, Steirischer Herbst, and it's a nomadic festival in terms of it changes every time the headquarter. And this was the site where the headquarters should be. And we wanted to make a building which was not a building, but was really just a big public space which could be used without any barriers, also on not just on the occasion that you have to enter a building, but it should be an integral part of this kind of new Graz. Temporary building have the big disadvantage that sometimes they create just trash. And therefore we just ran 2,000 euro pallets and created a building, which in fact was on one side a huge stage. This was an entry situation with ticket, and everything which we were working on was really just based on this kind of Euro palette. It was a statical adventure. Also here it was very difficult, obviously, because it was a public building in that moment, and also to find this kind of permission, etc. Then we invited designers which already worked with furniture, with this kind of Euro palettes, to make the project consequently full with this kind of design. So on one side, it was obviously part of the Styrian Art Festival, but most importantly, it was also a normal part of this kind of new public space, open, everybody could enter and transform it. It has this normal smell of the wood, but it had always this different kind of moments. And right now, all our bananas are still transported with them. So now I have to make a little switch in size, sorry, to go to another project. Okay. Okay. There was a competition for a new zone of Vienna, the biggest kind of project for the city of Vienna, Aspern, Seestadt, which is in the northeast of Vienna, behind the Danube. And it will be a new city part for 40,000 people, a new promise for that what a city could be, but a very kind of self-referential urban system. It repeats a little bit a ring structure, like in Vienna, and the heart is a void, it's a lake. So it was quite a conservative kind of urban plan, but Vienna had a very interesting competition. It was a competition for the whole public space, and it was a so-called guideline, Handbuch, for the public space, and we have participated and we have become second, and Jan Gehl has won, so it was also not so bad to lose against him. But anyway, we had a completely different approach, and a lot of the elements which we have proposed have then been put now in the other new differentiated master plan. So the main question, there was this new city coming, and they were all speaking about a creative city, a city for the creative class, etc. But at the end, hello? Okay. I close it. No, I hope. And there was this kind of myth that of San Francisco in the air. So, you know, McKinsey once made a big kind of research about the potential creative cities in Europe, and Vienna was among them. So there was always this kind of mystification. Wow, with the incredible mixture of biotechnology, informatics, students, poor migrants, and a very illuminated kind of administration, we could create a new Google or create the new something. But obviously this is just a complete mystification of all that. But still the thing was going on, and still there was a big question, how could this city at the edge of a city, which was put exactly there where all the others escaped from the city. This is just little housings with 1 or 2 floors, full of people which hated the city center and wanted to have freedom, and now the city has arrived, which is about 6 stories high. So this is a really super urban place, which will be constructed in 4 phases. And how could this not become just a huge housing complex? And also, Vienna is famous for good housing complex, but still a housing complex is not a city. And for us, this was really the question: how could we bring other people to this area next to the people which are already living here, just walking 2-3 kilometers to the new flat, or just searching cheap housing? And there was one, we made it together with a sociologist, Peter Alt, and we started with kind of ecosystem. So the first question was, if it should be a creative city, or this should be the new Kreuzberg, would we go there? And the answer was very clear, no. And it was really hard for us to make a competition for a city where we would never go. And so we started to make a city where we would like to go. And as you know, creative people are attracted by other creative ones. If you take 2 creative ones, you might have 5. If you have 5, you have 10. If you have 10, you have 20, you have a conference. And if you have 2,000, you have Kreuzberg. So, and then we started, what does creative people need? And this kind of ecosystem just brought us then to other people. What does a migrant need, etc., etc., etc. So we started to make a master plan for public space because we were convinced from the idea that public space is defined by its borders. And Vienna is the typical example of that. It has big, big spaces, but most of the squares are just representative ones. Nothing happens on the borders. There are sometimes no bars on it. There is no kind of ground floor activities which could enrich the possibilities. So first of all, you have to bring some kind of people there which attract other people which might make a difference. So the idea was really, how could we bring pioneers there? And it was really, really hard for us because normally we are invited to cities which already exist, which have empty spaces, and we have to work with these empty spaces. And the most easiest one is obviously the empty spaces are cheap, and you just can work within them. But here, no space has been constructed yet. The only emptiness is the void. And this is a city which is made in 4 phases, and we don't believe in master plans, not just from the idea of the master plan itself, but also from the idea of global economy. As you have seen, what crisis can bring, a master plan which is divided in 4 phases, and just the 4th phase creates the idea of a circular city, and the first phase is just a relic, a ruin of something which has no sense at all. And if a system can break down, how do you have a second plan? Do you have a plan B? And the idea was really to attract people first, to give them the possibility to use the first free fields, which are free for about 7 or 8 years. So at least you have an apartment, but you have a free field of experimentation, knowing that it will disappear after 8 years. But maybe you have winner, in a quite Darwinistic approach, but this kind of winner, which are accepted by the population or they make sense, should be integrated in the next phase of this kind of master plan. Then every kind of public element should have more functions, which should also expand the possibilities of the urban tools itself. And for every phase, we traded to find different kind of pioneers. One was the artistic one. Then there were the pioneers of the dark side. Every time when we speak about development of a city, we never speak about the dark side. After a while comes prostitution, after a while comes the crime, etc. But there are also already self-organizations of prostitutes in Germany, etc., which want to try to make a difference, which are pioneering in their own fields. And the idea was, how could you bring all these pioneers together and to create not a mirror system of Vienna, but also an experimental field of that what Vienna could be, also working specifically with certain kind of pioneers, knowing that the rest of the cheap apartments will just be regulated by the market, but that you have to focus also on other kind of people to make it make a difference. So this was the idea of that. How can you really make a difference throughout a long-term kind of strategy? And right now, speaking of a long-term strategy, we are trying to make a kind of a civil contract for bikers and the city, which is based on a very basic idea. If you bike in the city, you liberate, obviously, public ground. The more people are biking in the city, the less you have to invest in your parking areas, the less you have to invest in a kind of noise reduction, the less you have to invest in public health. So mathematically, it just would be fair that those who, in a certain way, reduce this kind of public effort, that our tax money is used for that, should have a reward system. Vienna has 6% of bikers, and they want to arrive at minimum of 10 to 15. And how could you create exactly that? And now we are working on a kind of an app system together with different institutions, where the more kilometers you bike, the more public goods you become. So it's a very long-term process. We are in the phase of developing the app, and we hope to make it happen this autumn already, the first phase. But it should be a kind of a growing system, and yeah, and you be sure to have a bike with you next time you come to Vienna. The last project I show you, it's on the intersection between the public, the rural, the urban, and it's a project which was based on a very, very small project, but still has a very strange long-term relationship with us, and also a long-term life. We were invited in the middle of the Apennine in Italy, in a project in an area next to Napoli, in a very rural area, in this kind of whole region of Napoli. And maybe this is also the main problem of the area itself, because the whole region is just focused on solving the problem of the metropolis right now, and has no money and no need and no electors for these kind of areas. There were 5 villages which suffered from this typical phenomenon of migration, but which was the starting point for the whole process. We were invited, and we had to follow 3 rules. First of all, we had to stay there for 1 month. Secondly, we were paid, but we had 10,000 euros material budget. And third, we had to work with the local economy and with participants. And they were telling us we would have to work with 8, 9 persons, but at the end we had around 60. And we came there in a mixture of making holidays and making a research, but everything came completely different. And everything you see now is just post-reflection. We had no plans, they had no drawings, we just were us on site, and it was just surprises. So this area suffered from 2 big waves of migration. One was at the beginning of the 20th century, the big movement to South America, to North America, to Australia, to Great Britain, and then in the 50s, with the birth of the big companies like Fiat in the north of Italy, the big movement to Milano and Turin, and then to Switzerland in the 60s, 70s, and to Germany. So it caused 2 kind of ruins and a serious transformation of the landscape itself. On one side, the ruins coming by people leaving the spaces, and secondly, this kind of phenomena of the first investments of people abroad, like in Switzerland, hoping obviously to go back because they had this strong relationship with the territory, invest the first money, the first groundings, and hoping that if not them, but at least the children would go back. But obviously this never happened, because the children have become Swiss or Germans or British. And secondly, the 20th century, or mainly the second part of the 20th century, was a moment of incredible acceleration of technology and of transformation. And if you were out in that period, you were really out. And this obviously caused an enormous transformation of landscape. But when we were on site, we were inspecting a complete provincial area, but we found an enormous cosmopolitan field. Because it has to do with the family structure of southern Italy. Family is something which has to do with the second cousin. And if you speak about family, you speak about 120 people. And for example, what we found, it was one of the villages, Latino, 700 people live there, but they are in male contact. I'm speaking about male, not e-mail. And with 700 families abroad. Galla Matesa had 5,000 inhabitants in the 50s. Now it has 800 inhabitants. But just the New York community of the people of Galla Matesa has already 1,500 people, which are meeting every 15th of August, Ferragosto. So also the participants who worked with us had this kind of same kind of biography, this complexity of stories. This was Biagio, lived 5 years in Switzerland, 40 years in Germany, next to Stuttgart, with a specific dialect. He spoke German with us. We had understood no word. But obviously, this is a territory of respect where you have to demonstrate that you understand everything. And yeah, but it was full of this kind of very like invisible soft skill we had to educate. Or Mario L'Americano, everybody has this kind of double names, which is a normal worker, but he's living half of the year in Rhode Island, where his family is living now, and half of the year in Prata Sanita. So this brings us also here, before Facebook, to this theory of small worlds, where there is kind of, how can I say, all the network of our highly complex societies, made not just by managers, which are switching between different territories, but obviously also all these kind of migrants, which are connecting personally areas. If we speak about South Italy, we speak, and especially about that territory, we speak about the Camorra as well. And that was also this kind of weird situation that on one side, 80 kilometers away, you had a territory with a black economy of 32 milliard euros. And on the other side, you had complete poorness. But this was also the reason why most of them escaped to much, much far away. But the interesting part of that, where we have gone, that the Camorra has no interest in that territory because there are no voters. So you cannot make a deal with the administration. So it was like a territory full of a kind of innocence, like in this kind of Pasolini films. And for us, it was very striking. If you speak about Italy, you have to speak also about the social landscape in it. At the age of 25, 50% of Italian women still live at their parents' home. This is before the crisis. But surprise, 70% of Italian men are cooked by mama and let the dishes, let them be helped. But this has also another reason. It has the reason that the housing market does not exist. And if you compare to Germany, Germany has a market that you could rent, but Italy it's full of property. So also that is a reason why people are not going away. But also there is this kind of paradox situation that on one side you have a need for private space, and on the other side you have an abundance of empty spaces. So also the Fiat Uno here, it's not just a symbol, but it's really a need. If you are young and you want to have sex, you have to have a car in the south. But before internet, there was television, and Berlusconi was very successful also transforming the most remote areas of Italy with a new idea of what a female person should look like and what she should do. Mass tourism obviously changed the whole territory of Italy, but was also the big chance for all these hidden places and all these unforgotten places. Shrinking was being put on the discourse by Philip Oswald, but it's always a phenomenon which has to do with the whole south of Europe. And this kind of cheap flight possibilities changed our territory. So these were the thinking we had in our mind when we came there to make a difference, or at least to try to make something. So when we were there, we found this beautiful place, Prata Sanita. It's like, I don't know if you know the book of Bernard Rudowski, Architecture Without Architects. It was full of this kind of enormous beauty. When I made these kind of pictures, I couldn't know that exactly this would be the spaces where we would interact. I just tried to document them, all this kind of empty space, which were a symbol also of losing, and how can I say, it had also to do with the complex between the south and the north, and the south feeling itself as a loser, that all these kind of spaces which form a great part of this kind of village have been forgotten and lost. It has also to do with poorness, with analphabetism, and with going away. Families were rich of children at that years, and all of them have gone away to very far places, so it brings you also back to the idea of what is property, private property, but because if all they would come back with children and children and children, you just, in these ridiculous spaces already, you just could have a heritage of 10 square decimeters. But so they have become part of the public ground and were also used by the municipality. So we found a village divided in two parts. This was the medieval part, which you have seen, which was dominated. This is the street system where you already feel this kind of situationist adventure, and your mind has feet growing, and you just want to discover. And then you have the newer part, which is also quite old actually, but which was formed by the paradigm of the horse and then obviously of the car. What did we do? We wanted to create a communication tool. There was no tourism around. We had 10,000 euros and we wanted to build a hotel. And a hotel is, in a certain way, is nothing else than a lot of little cells put together in a bigger entity. The cells are the rooms, and then you have kind of semi-public areas, which are this kind of the grounds, the reception, the areas where you encounter, etc. And we wanted to transform the whole village with his own qualities in a kind of a new reading in a diffuse hotel. And we were using the few empty spaces we had as part of a new kind of a system where they could transform slowly also the other rooms. And at the beginning, we really just wanted to start as a methodology, just as a strategy, trying to make interviews with them about migration, about the transformation of public space, the idea of the common and the idea of that, what they could do together. But we arrived there, and they said, we have already 40 people waiting in the municipality. They want to know what to do. We had no clue at all. I was like, I had to go there like, like the doctor in front of a patient and telling that everything will be all right, but we had no clue at all. And but then we started together, and the idea was clear for them. We create from the beauty of the village and these little shops and the little tabacchino, etc. We put them all together to a bigger entity, which means you arrive on the main square, you ask for the Million Donkey Hotel, and then people will bring you in and bring you to that place. Also, the name was there before the hotel itself. We were just sitting in a cafeteria, and we were so frustrated because when we knew that, we said we need 1 million donkeys to build this project because we have one moment time, we have all the hopes of the population. And strangely, there was a journalist sitting on a table, and next day on the Repubblica, in that part of southern Italy, they wrote, Feld 72 is building the Million Donkey Hotel, so we had no excuse. And as you know, that everything which is written in an Italian newspaper is always the truth, you have to follow it. So it was mainly based, obviously, on discussing, on discussing what could be the needs, how could we transform them, and then what are the skills of all these persons. All this, and it was the first time that people, old and young, which was obvious because who had time, the students and the ones which had no work, and with all their specific skills could participate and worked on this kind of thing. It was a very dramatic moment. Every time we opened the door, it was like a horror movie, don't open the door, because there was a disaster behind, and we had the ticking time bomb, 1 month, 10,000 euros behind us. So this was the square which you have seen. It's all built next to the rocks, and we wanted to use all the material which we found on site to transform it. We opened up this kind of space just with the stones. Yeah, kind of working condition like in old Egypt, but everybody made it for free. And it was really like nation building or like community building. And because we have become friends, it started at 7:30, then it went on until 1, then they made siesta. We didn't because we had to invent a project. And it went on and on and on. And it was really, really touching because once we were working on site, and an older man came by and said he was born in this kind of little room. He's living now in Miami, and he has 2 weeks of holidays. And for a whole week, he was there working on this project because he really believed in this kind of transformation. So this was one of the first rooms we finished, Spazio d'Argento. Every of these kind of stones have been put in this kind of concrete situation. These are the sit holes where you could sit down. Everything was opened up. It was a very cool situation in terms of temperature. And yeah, this was this kind of moment where you then had a little table where you could sit down. Everything was constructed by them. Then this was the lower ground of a tower, and everybody knowing something about statics knows there is something going wrong here. And also we found that out, so we had another problem. A lot of the budget had to go inside here. But so we found, and it was a growing kind of social commitment and social experience, and then we convinced the major, I don't tell you how, it went through our stomach for a lot of hours, and but then he wanted to help us to make a bathroom, etc. Very important for identity in a team is the T-shirt of La Squadra, where we put all the names, but it was a constant process. We were approximately 5 weeks on site. One of us, I was following it for the whole time, and the other were switching, like always being 2 weeks because we had obviously other project going on. And what we are really interested in is to use everyday objects and to put them in a new level. This is La Mosquera, which is a very, very clever tool to don't let the fly enter the kitchen, but let the air flow through it. So, and we were thinking maybe 2 meters might be kitsch, but maybe 4.8 kilometers might be something different. And in the space you just seen, we transformed that into the bathroom and made a kind of a forest of these ropes with 4.8 kilometers. And the idea behind was really create like a space which also works with the idea of shame and of that what you hide when you're naked in the Italian culture. So right now you open a door and you go throughout this kind of little forest of this kind of mosquera. And then you arrive inside and you go on the other side. This was one of the other rooms. We made a calculation how much they worked for free, which was an enormous amount, obviously, of money itself. And also here you see, like in a German kind of construction site, everything regulated as it should be. And yeah, but everybody with his own skills, and they were really fantastic, added their knowledge and their hopes and their will to make it happen. So after 24 days it was finished, and also we were. And so this is the letto volante, the flying bed. So where you just go on, and then you look, and then you go a little bit out, and then you're under the stars, just lying in this kind of poetry moment. So this is where you can sleep. This was the gray space. This was a black, another space I don't show you right now. The bathroom was here, etc. So this is no Photoshop. And but it was really a very interesting moment where all this kind of two generations came together for this kind of public and common idea of having something which is their own tool. And then they make a pressure to the curators to invite us for the second year. And we then added, from a ruin of a house, we made a real stair house in form that we just added a huge stair, which has become then a tribune and a kind of a public passage through the village, but where we made also the first cinema in town. So where we then, also there we tried to focus also on this kind of initiatives, because it was part of a bigger project called Paesaggio Azione Matese, where they really want to focus on the transformation of this landscape. And but it was much more like a project which we're just there for 2 weeks. And also we were really surprised. We could not expect what was happening, and we could not believe that it would still continue and continue and continue. So without them, nothing would have been possible. And then we made a homepage at the beginning, which was a kind of a process, narration and a storytelling, but it should obviously be also a kind of a booking tool. But we had a hotel and we had no money to promote it. But it was fundamental, because it was not about money, but it was about encountering. It was about going there, having an adventure. The hotel is now part of the association on site. They have to care for that. But it's really based on the idea that they have developed a tool where all the spaces could be used as normal public spaces, but for specific needs, when people are coming, they could sleep there. But again, we had no budget, so from one part of the budget, we invited curators and journalists, of which we know they would tell us the truth. Because we were like anthropologists, we were too much in the field. It worked on the field, but we had no idea if it's complete crap, or from an outside position, if it could work. And it was really fantastic, because everybody was very, very enthusiastic. And if you look, for example, there was an article, a whole page in the Standard. And the Standard, if you would have to pay it as an advertisement, it would be like 45,000 euros. That means 4.5 hotels. So it would have been impossible. But all where the kind of articles were spreading around, people then wrote and came to visit it, and they stood much longer. But it was a really, really weird process, like a kind of a Fitzcarraldo situation of collective madness, where you start something and nobody knows where it would happen. And also, if I would ever have told the major at the beginning of the process that his little, small town at the end of the world would ever be in a front page with Osaka, Weil am Rhein, Munich, Abu Dhabi, he would put us directly in the madhouse, but strangely it worked. And this kind of process then brought us together and let it grow. And we were invited to the Maxi 2011-2012 to make a reflection about it in the exhibition about recycling. So we used the power, the manpower of Prata Sanit itself, and we wanted to make a kind of a public library which is telling analog the story of the project, which had made a wide way also in the perception. It went, I think, 2 times in the Biennale, but that didn't count. But it was just important for us to give them the feeling what they have really achieved, but to make a little element which is a public library, which we then can be put into the amphitheater itself. So this was the installation, and right now it's waiting for us, and this summer it will be on site, and we have to transform it. And as the association is made of people, some people have become old, some people have died, some people of the young have gone away, and some people have returned. So it's a project in constant process, and right now we are relaunching it. We still receive kind of emails asking for rooms, and right now we have to put this library on site, and yeah, I hope from next autumn on you're very welcome to be there as well. Thank you very much.